Hi Peter, how are you?
I'm doing very well. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. So thank you very much for accepting my invitation and accepting to be on my show.
Welcome. Very good to be on your show.
So I've gone through your profile. I can see you're doing a lot of work. So I thought to tell about your work to my audience.
Yeah, of course. So as a job, basically, I'm a platform developer. So we basically do .NET mostly with C Sharp as the language we use there. So basically build microservices for player management features. But my side gig, if you like, is basically I have a website which is rogueplanetoid.com, and there I post like general posts, articles about events I attend, and I also have a podcast as well. So I've only got a few episodes because it's just launched, but there I talk about tech topics, Microsoft related stuff, that kind of thing. And my other website is tutorialer.com. So that's where I post like tutorials from things like Windows App SDK, and I also write workshops as well about topics like Blazor.
You're from?
Yes, I'm from the northeast of England in the UK. So I live in Gateshead and I work remotely, but my job is based in Newcastle, so it's just across the river from me, so it's not too far away. But yeah, it's good to live and work in the northeast.
So you are a software developer and you post things which are related to software development.
I do, yes, yes. So I post a lot of general articles on my website. I also attend a lot of events in the Northeast. We have quite a few user groups here in the Northeast of England, and I attend many of those, and I write about them on my website. So that's from other speakers as well, because I speak at those kind of events myself. But I also write about what other people are talking about, just generally interested in what's going on. In fact, there was a conference just yesterday that I was at called Thinking Digital, which is one of the largest sort of tech conferences in the UK, and that's just in Gateshead in my hometown. So that was really great to be there yesterday, and I of course wrote all about that on my website.
I can see before this you have done different works. Can you share that?
Yeah, I've kind of had this sort of a wide and varied career, as one might say. My first sort of job was when I was at uni. It was a placement job, so I worked over in Germany, and I did some development there. Did some Java development back then, and a few other things. Even wrote a little website for the team there. Then sort of my next major gig was like initially it was part time. It was working for an online secondhand bookstore. So basically, it was kind of like, Amazon Marketplace where people could sell their books online. It was basically a way of people could recycle their books, and I was brought in as the only developer. So that was quite a challenge to basically bring the website to .NET. That was really, really cool. The next job I had after that was actually I got something through an event. I was presenting at an event and talking about something I'd been working on, and a guy came up to me and said, "Hey, that's really cool, Peter. Do you want to come to a meeting in like next week and talk about what you're doing, and we see if we've got a place for you here?" And I literally went to that meeting, and they're like, "Right, uh, here's a job for you," basically. So that was really good. So that was working on like digital signage solutions in venues, so basically showing content on the screen, and I helped develop the early version of their technology, which basically showed static content, so no like offers and things like that. And that was actually using WPF in ASP.NET, which, if anyone knows, those things don't normally go together. But I figured out how to get it to work. So, and then the next few jobs were basically working in different sectors. I've worked in like the utility sector, developing solutions there. And I've also worked in the online gaming sector on the platform side, and that's what I currently do as well. So I've kind of stuck with that with a couple of things in between, but it's always kind of been .NET related. That's been my main passion.
So how much experience you have?
Yeah, so I've been working professionally for about over 20 years. So my first job was back that first one in the year 2000, and I basically followed .NET from its birth. .NET also came out around then as well, so it's nice to sort of see it go through. So that's sort of my professional experience. But as a personal developer, I actually started a lot sooner than that. I think it was 11 years old when I think I first started coding. So that was on the Commodore 64, if anyone remembers that, and I wrote BASIC on that. And then my next sort of big programming thing at home was when I got an old Toshiba T1200 laptop. So my dad rescued it from being thrown away into the rubbish. They were just throwing this computer away, and he's like, "This is perfectly good. I can take that home." For me, and I was able to use that, and I learned GW Basic, which is like another version of Basic, and just wrote a few applications from there. And then I kind of just grew up on from there, basically writing different kinds of things. I went on to Visual Basic because that made sense. Basic, I was like, I know this. So, and then I sort of worked my way along till eventually I switched to C Sharp. So yeah, it's got quite a fun journey, and it meant that the stuff that I learned at home ended up being the stuff that I did in a job. So I kind of self-taught a lot of the things that I do, and it was great to be able to turn something that was a passion and a hobby into a job as well, which was great.
And you attend conferences, and you have a podcast. You participate in discussions as well.
Yeah. So I've done lots of events. But basically, I've done talks about things I've worked on. I remember one particular talk was quite fun. I was doing some tutorials at the time, and one of them wasn't working properly. And I was like, "What's wrong with this? What's wrong with this example? I must have done something wrong." And it's like, "No, I'm not wrong. Windows was wrong. Something had happened in Windows that had been changed." And then, of course, I went straight online and said, "Hey, I found this problem," and they were like, "Wow, we didn't know about this." So I actually got a bug fix. It was just a small one, nothing to really shout about, but it was really cool to have that kind of relationship with Microsoft for a bit and see the bug go through testing. And it was about a month later, it actually ended up on people's computers, the fix. So I was really proud to have contributed back then to sort of, I didn't actually write the code, I didn't fix the problem myself, but I did sort of point it out. So that was quite cool. But just kind of generally talking about the stuff I'm interested in is really, really cool. I love doing talks. I've done loads of talks. I've done them on like WPF, which I've mentioned before. I've also done it on Windows Phone. If everyone knows Windows Phone, I was the big Windows Phone developer back in the day. And I talked about some of the stuff I worked on there. So yeah, I've talked about so much stuff and attended loads of talks as well. I mean, I've learned a lot from others as well. So it's great to be able to sort of give back and talk about stuff myself.
So 20 years you have worked in Microsoft products and services. So how is that experience?
Yeah, so basically I started with the .NET Alpha, Visual Studio .NET when it was first announced, when it first released, and I had a go at that. And I was like, oh, this is really interesting. And then just sort of went through from there. I was doing it for myself. I didn't really expect it to turn into a job. I wanted it to, but it was kind of one of those things where I was like, I just thought I'll give it a go. And then an opportunity came up to basically go into a company who were saying, we've got an older version of our website and we would like to be able to update it. And I was like, perfect, I can use .NET. I'd actually never done an ASP.NET website before. I just thought, I know enough about .NET, I could do this, and I was all right with it. But it was really great to sort of have that kind of challenge. I couldn't go to anyone else for help. I had to do it all myself, but it was a great learning process. And from there, I took my skills in web development to another company where I sort of honed those skills a lot better. So I've kind of done like web development professionally and done desktop development as a personal hobby. Often it's the other way around. So I kind of mix and match a little bit more recently. But yeah, throughout the 20 years, I've seen a big change. I've seen .NET go from this sort of proprietary thing that's to now where you can run it in your browser, you can run it in Linux, you can even run it on a mobile device. So it's kind of cool to see how far, and I knew it'd get there. I was always confident in .NET. I was like, yeah, why is no one choosing .NET? I was saying, and they were like, oh, because it doesn't work on this, that, and the other. All the things they say it didn't work on does now. So I was finally right in the end.
And right now, what kind of projects you are involved in, and what are the technologies and tools that you are using?
Yeah, so for work, it's the latest version of .NET. So most of our stuff for work is .NET 6, but we are doing .NET 7 as well. And we are obviously using C Sharp and the latest practices. So we're on Azure, so we use that as our solution, and it's mostly microservice based. So the stuff that I work for on the platform side is like the player management features and that sort of thing. So it's great to sort of leverage those modern .NET skills. I've seen older versions of .NET, obviously in earlier in my career, but it's nice to be on the cutting edge. And the company's very good about that. We'll definitely be using .NET 8 when that comes out, for example, and even considering things like Blazor and stuff like that, where that would be a good fit in the business. But for home, it's free reign. I can just use whatever I want. But it's nice to be able to use the latest technology at home and at work, which can be quite rare sometimes. So it's great to have like a sort of forward-looking company who's like, yeah, let's use this. If there's a good reason to use it, we will. And then I can do that myself at home or bring in some of the skills. In fact, at work, we had a learning at work week, and I did a workshop writing a Blazor game. So it was a Blazor emoji bingo game where you could basically play bingo, and that was to show everyone. Blazor itself and also just have a bit of fun while we were doing it as well. So that was quite a fun game to write.
And working for different industries, working for different businesses, solving problems and giving solutions for them in this technology career of yours till now. So how is that working for different things?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it would be surprising how a certain solution would apply later on. I remember when I developed that technology to basically show that content on screens, that was like a fun little thing that I had worked on myself just to play around with. And then when the opportunity came up at work, we did that and were able to deploy that as a real product. You know, we actually had that in real venues showing content, but it actually helped inspire an idea with my boss. My boss came up to me and said, "Can we do that with video?" And I was like, oh, we actually figured out that you could script Adobe After Effects. So we actually produced a video version of the same solution. I helped work on that as well. But it was like, it came to me and said, right, make this work in video. And I figured this out. He'd figured out the scripting side and just sort of left me to it. It was really great to sort of work out this whole pipeline where we could render videos, effectively broadcast quality video, kind of the stuff you see on sports and stuff, where it would show like the teams that were playing a particular sport in a venue that the venue was showing, and we just basically used the same idea and translated it to video, and it was amazing to see that technology sort of evolve. And then to have that same idea sort of come up again, there was a job in I was in later where we kind of need to do a similar thing. It was like we were pitching different ideas, and one of them was let's do content generation. I was like, I know how to do this, so so I produced like a proof of concept, which was a content generation system. We went with a different solution in the end, but it was nice to sort of leverage that same technology. And then I did a talk about it as well. Of course, I had to show it off. I was like, here's this technology. And everyone was like, these two things don't go together normally, because it was just one of those things that I'd worked out myself and just wanted to show off and say, you can totally do this, and you can still do it today in modern .NET. So yeah, I've kind of learned that certain things and certain jobs can actually apply to something completely different. I've seen the same solution I've come up with, a way of working or a way of coding that can then apply to a job and just bring something different, bring something that I've learned in a previous job. And in my current job, because it's in a similar sector as one I worked in previously, I can bring a lot of the knowledge I had from there as well. I mean, it's very different from what I'd done before, but it's kind of nice to see how portable skills can be. It doesn't matter as long as it's .NET. I've pretty much been able to be okay. I've helped develop various different solutions for like pharmaceutical companies and all sorts of things, but all using those .NET skills that I built up over the years.
So working for businesses which belongs to different category, it can be small or medium or bigger scale companies. Is it same to work for those levels?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So in one of my jobs, I was the only developer. So it's nice to have someone to bounce ideas off. Luckily, the owner of the company was quite technical minded. He wasn't a developer himself. He kind of understood the domain. He knew what he wanted. Often clients don't know what they want. He always knew what he wanted. And he knew I could deliver. He said, Peter, here's this idea. Can you do this? So yeah, it's kind of nice to have that sort of, like sort of being able to bounce an idea off someone. So I've worked in various team sizes. I worked in a team of about 3 or 4, again, where I could talk to the other developers, but most of the team size has been varied. In my current company, there's about 4 or 5 of us in the team that I'm in, but we've also got multiple people in other teams as well. So we always talk. We have chats on Slack or on Google Meet where we'll talk about the work that we're on, and anything if we're stuck with anything, that sort of thing, and help each other out. I've always liked to be like a mentor in companies. I kind of like to sort of share, because I've built up a lot of skills over the years. It's nice to be able to share that. So that's the kind of experience I've been able to bring. So in all the companies I've been in, I've tried to strive to be the person people can come to and say, Peter, how do you do this? That kind of thing. But I've also been the person who'll go, how do I do this? So it's always been a learning experience. So I've definitely found through even though all the jobs have been very different, I've definitely found that there's a lot of transferable skills. And even if you're a developer of one or you're in a developer team of dozens, you can still get something from that experience, and you can go between them as well, which is really good.
Technology is changing constantly, and change is constant in in this industry. So how you are able to adapt yourself for the constant change that is happening in technology in this 20 years?
Yeah, that's a good point because that's the sort of the odd can be a downside sometimes of being in the sector for so long is you're used to the way things used to be, and .NET has changed a lot. A lot more has been added to it since I started out as a developer. But the best thing to do is to keep up, keep changing. Don't assume, oh, it's like, I know .NET, there's no more for me to learn. It's not true. There's always something being added. I always learn something. I always think to myself, every week's a learning week. Even if you're a developer with as much experience as me, I'll still learn something new, or there's something different. Maybe there's a new way of doing things, a new working practice that, say, 20 years ago, we would have done something differently. Now we do a different way. And just being able to respond to that change. So I think the best advice for anyone is just to kind of like, go with the flow and also learn stuff, like take some time out, write examples. I did that with my tutorials. I would go, oh, I could use this feature, but I'll probably never have much use for it. Uh, but I'll write a tutorial about it. So I did. And then like a year or two or so down the line, I'd end up using that same feature. I wrote like an example about encryption. And so I'll probably use that at some point in the future. And then a couple of years down the line, it came up. I had to use some encryption, and it was very similar to what I'd done. And it was only because of that I had an understanding. I'd have to have took the time to learn it, but I'd already learned it back then when I thought it'd be useful to. So I think, yeah, take the time to write, do something small. And there's a bit of .NET you've never used before. Have a go at it. And then you never know when it might come in handy. I found that so many times where I've learned something and it's come up, and it's like, right, I can then leverage that. But then sometimes it's not, and I do need to learn it. So I'll do the same thing. I'll write a little example, play around with it, figure it out, and then I'll apply that to the work I do.
And what are the resources from which you learn? And today you are providing the resources people to learn from you.
Yeah, so initially it was quite difficult to find stuff back in the, before the millennium, if you like. It was very hard to find resources online. Search engines weren't really a thing. You could find stuff, but it was very, very difficult. And I thought beginners materials were kind of rare. They kind of would jump ahead. They would sort of go a little bit too deep too quickly, and make it a bit difficult. I even found it difficult to learn initially. So I just decided to write my own tutorials to teach myself, but also teach others who wanted to learn to code as well. So that's the kind of resource that's interesting. People published their code a lot back then, luckily, and still do. There wasn't things like GitHub, but there was places where you could get, source code from, so you could learn from that. But it's very rare to find sort of tutorials, and that's why I started writing them myself on my website. And I continue to write them from like the late 90s all the way up to now. I basically started with Visual Basic back then in 1997, and then to 2023, where I'm writing them about Windows App SDK. So they couldn't be more different, but I'm applying the same rules, explaining, this is how to build this example step by step, just to get something going. The biggest satisfaction is getting something working for the first time. So I want to be able to bring that experience to everyone in a way that I did that for myself, weirdly, but I did see other people doing that too. And that's kind of how I learned initially. Resources are a lot easier to find these days, luckily. I had to use like MSDN on a disk back when I first started. Basically, it's hard to believe that you had to load the library on your computer and view it there, and you have to go through it all. But now you can search the Microsoft documentation, which is excellent. If you don't know how a particular feature works in .NET, you can just go to the documentation and you can find out. So it's a lot easier. But the main thing is basically just look for the resources that make sense to you as well. There's video tutorials out there now, and there's all sorts of things like that. So it's just basically finding what works for you, or even books. I learned from a lot of books originally as well. Would go through an example and type it out. Even back when I first started, I was using the manual. I'd refer to okay, what does this command do? So it's just, and you don't have to know it all. The key skill is knowing how to look up stuff. That's knowing it all is impossible. The biggest skill, I think, is just learning what to look for. And nowadays it's getting a bit easier. You've got things like ChatGPT and Bing Chat, where you can ask it a question. Fair enough, it might be a little bit inaccurate, but it gives you a starting point. Even if the code is slightly wrong that it produces, it gives you a starting point. Write a bit of code that does this. you can ask it that, and it'll produce something pretty close to what you want, but that's much closer than nothing. So that's where probably today it's probably a little bit easier to get going. Ask Bing Chat to write "Hello World" in C sharp, and it will do it for you. Whereas back when I had to do it, I had to write it myself. So it's a little bit easier to get started now.
So how much you know about Microsoft products or services since you're communicating with computers and machines from long time with different mediums, learning different technologies and tools, how it works, working on it on different applications which belongs to different industries. You said pharmaceutical and you said you worked for different applications. So communicating like this, knowing how things work in order to make application run or work in different servers, how much you have understood about Microsoft products and services in whole and how they are
Yeah,
thinking.
yeah, of course. Yeah, so for Microsoft stuff, it's one of those things I think many people consider me like an expert on Microsoft stuff, I guess. I kind of locally known for that in the Northeast. It's just always been my passion to sort of have some expertise in it. But you don't have, as I said, you don't have to know it all. You just have to know a little bit to get started and then find the pieces that you don't know. But generally, I like to have a good understanding of how it works. I like to sort of dive deep into something. I want to know about Blazor. I'll write an example and play around with it, see what it does, and how that applies to stuff I've learned previously. Basically, it's just that natural progression, I think, is how that works. But yeah, just having a play around with it. Have a look at Windows, see what's in there. Have a look at .NET, see what's in there. It's just like investigating it. Back a few years ago when I was a Windows Phone developer, I wrote an application which was part of it was one of the first apps on the server. So basically, they had an early access program with 1,000 apps, and I had two of them. So I was one of the first developers on Windows Phone, and that application was part of a service called Zune. If anyone knows Zune, they may have known it from Guardians of the Galaxy more than anything else because it's been featured in the last two movies. But basically, that's a music player that Microsoft produced that unfortunately didn't succeed. But what it did launch was a social service. You could see what your friends were listening to if your friends had Zunes. And this service, you could see on it in a browser, so you could see it on the web, but you couldn't see it on the phone. So I basically wrote an app that allowed you to surface that information, or I assumed it did because the phone hadn't came out at the point. I thought, I'll do this app, but Microsoft will do it anyway. Turns out Microsoft never did it. So I basically produced this app, and basically what I did is I figured out more and more about how their service works. So I used that kind of, how does this actually work? So I really took a close look at the service and what it was doing. And I was able to add all sorts of features to this application I never would have thought of. I just thought I wanted to make it as rich as possible. So in the end, it was able to play the music. So, you've got Spotify, you can play Spotify music. If you had their equivalent music players, you could listen to the music through the app itself. So you could go to your friends, look them up, see what the latest album that they had, and you could play it inside the app, the full track. And I was really proud of that. That was just from figuring stuff out, seeing how that service worked. And that was one of those applications that was relatively popular on that platform. But that's all it is. It's basically just a curiosity about how things work and, just sort of diving deep into how these sort of things work. I wanted to learn basics, so I studied the manual. I wanted to learn VB, so I just, wrote my tutorials in C sharp. I just kind of transitioned to that because Windows Phone needed C sharp, so that's the reason why I switched to C sharp at the time. So it's various ways you can learn it, but it's impossible to learn it all. No one knows it all. If they do, then they're a genius, right? But if you know enough, you know enough, and you've got a basis on which you can form an understanding. That's the most important thing. And with Microsoft products, they're very sort of similar. .NET, Blazor is very similar to ASP.NET. So I was all able to reuse my skills. So if you're an ASP.NET developer, Blazor will be probably pretty easy for you to pick up. But even if not, Blazor is pretty easy to pick up, and then you can pick up ASP.NET. So it's a lot easier to get started now. You don't have to dive deep into the technology as much as you used to because a lot of it is there for you already. A lot of the difficult stuff you like is taken care of, which was not the case when I first started. So it's basically just progressing that learning technique and seeing what you can find. That's why I do my tutorials and my presentations. I want to sort of highlight some of these technologies and show them off to people basically.
So how you are able to manage the software development on one side, which is your full-time job, and you're creating content and you're helping somebody to learn from what you have learned. So how you are able to manage your time?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So obviously 9 to 5 is it's the job. So I basically work on that. So that's why I'm working on the platform side and the team that I'm in. For my own projects, basically all the rest of the time. So not all of that time, but it depends on what things I'll doing. I might be working on a talk, so I'll spend some time on that. I usually like to spend a good few weeks or less on producing a talk. I'll have a particular topic in mind and I'll work on that. And then I'll just work on that in maybe the evenings and a little bit in the weekends, take my time on it. I also have like a monthly podcast. So I'll take some time to write that. Then I'll obviously record it and edit it and release it. The last episode I did, which was about Blazor, I actually recorded and edited and released that within a couple of days, which was a little bit tight for the deadline there, but it was just to see if that was possible. But generally, I like to have it done well in time. They're not very timely, so they don't have to be at a particular time. But it's just the best way to manage that sort of time is just find a couple of hours you want to work on something. And that's what I do. If I want to write a new tutorial, I'll spend a couple, I'll think about it. I'll write it up, then I'll write it in the form of a tutorial. Most of the ones I'm doing, luckily, are ones based on older ones. So I already have the idea. I just have to make it more modern. That makes it a little bit easier. But just taking the time when I can to work on these sort of things. For the workshop at work, I was able to do a lot of that at work. So that was quite handy because it was part of my job. But generally, it's just, taking that time, take a couple of hours here and there to work on my projects. And that's the same for everyone. That's what I'd say to anyone. You don't have to work 24/7. You can just, if you've got a couple of hours spare, maybe write a little example or write a little game or something like that. Just something to try some technology out. Maybe you've never used Blazor. Have a go at that or something else. But yeah, that's the way I manage it at the moment. I basically take a couple of hours here and there, and I'll work on something then.
So how Microsoft products and services are helping other businesses to run their businesses? How their services are thinking, I mean, in the development of their services, how Microsoft is being creative about helping other businesses.
Yeah, so Microsoft technology is basically definitely helping. In my current company, we're using Azure, so a lot of our services and other things are running on Azure. So we use like Azure Service Bus for messaging and other sorts of parts of Azure as well. So that really helps. Being able to leverage the power of the cloud basically is something that's really important in my current business, and it has been in previous businesses as well. Basically, the technology is coming with us. If you need something in .NET, it's there for you. It's pretty much got full coverage of everything that a developer would generally need. If there's a specific platform it needs to run on, you're probably pretty much well covered there. So Microsoft are pretty good at delivering what we need. Visual Studio is an excellent development environment. I mean, it's something I've used since it started, since the Visual Studio actually first started with VB6. So I've been using it all. I've used every single version of Visual Studio pretty much that's come out, as well as every version of .NET. So I've seen that evolution, and the tooling is excellent. We've also got VS Code. So if you want to use that as well, that's a much smaller version of Visual Studio, and you can develop other things in that too. So it's kind of good to see these tools. And you can also develop third-party applications. There's things like the Uno platform. You can leverage Microsoft tooling to use that with, or there's Avalonia as well. So Microsoft tooling can kind of give you a bit of an edge there. There's also features like IntelliCode, which is like a cut down version of a GitHub Copilot, which basically just fills out some of the code for you. But then you've got things like GitHub Copilot, which will basically write the code for you, basically write a comment saying, write this particular feature, and it will produce that for you. And so there's that AI assistance is starting to come into the products as well in the last few months, and more of that will be coming in the future as well. So it just makes a developer's life a lot easier. The less sort of like minutiae stuff you have to do, the better. So that's where Microsoft really, really win with with their stack. They're taking care of a lot of things for them, and they put a lot of effort into things like performance and usability and all those sort of things. It's usually a good choice pretty much no matter what you're doing. to use a Microsoft technology in some way or in some regard. But yeah, they put a lot of effort into the developer tooling, and it's always improving as well. They're adding things, even simple things like a spell checker. When you're writing your code, the worst thing you do is you tend to write a last name wrong or something. You spell it wrong, like authentication or something, and you don't notice. But now you can get the spell checker to say, so just simple additions like that are making a big difference. And just it's always evolving. It's not standing still. If there's something that's not there, you can write a plugin or you can or something like that. So it basically is something that continuously evolves. Even if Microsoft don't do it, there's nothing stopping another developer from adding some functionality to, say, Visual Studio that isn't already there.
Are you able to give what a client wants with the technology skills that you have?
I think so. I mean, in my current job, it's .NET microservices. So the .NET experience I've built up, I've been able to sort of deliver the solutions there. In like previous jobs, that's also been the case as well. It's usually finding what's the good fit. There was a particular client who had some particular requirements, um, and for that application, I made a particular technology choice that meant that they could not only do that, but they could also use a more mature technology in the future if they wanted. So they kind of like had to work on more versions of Windows than the current technologies use. But because of the flexibility of the way I had written it, that meant that they could, progress to the next version of that technology and allow them to target a much broader base once they made that change. So that's the kind of approach you can sort of take to software development there.
So what do you think that happened in your technology career that really made you become so very potential and be in the place where you are today?
It's taking opportunities. I think, it's just like, you never know when an opportunity might come up. I was so basically like for my placement year, I wasn't sure about what to do. When there's so many choices, who do I work for? And I just got phoned up and it was a company in Germany and they said, do you want to work in Germany? I was like, yeah, why not? It'll be a bit of a challenge. And I worked over there and, for the job that I got by chance, that was when I was at a talk. So I was doing a talk about it and, someone approached me. So if I'd never done that talk, I never would have got that job. If somebody just says, do you want to do this thing? Just take that opportunity because you never know where these things might lead you. A small change could lead to like a big outcome. You never know what that thing might be. You could decide to go to a conference, and from that conference, you might learn something. You might meet someone that ends up, being so. I've met and spoken to people earlier in my career that landed up being in, more important positions later on, and I was able to. That gave me an in there as well. I said, hi, I remember you from years ago. So it's kind of like making those connections as well as I think is getting yourself out there. I tend to attend many events in the Northeast. I speak to a lot of people. I speak to a lot of people who are earlier in their journey in their career, and it's nice to see people that I've spoken to like before come through and do other things because they've taken those opportunities. They they may not come up very often, but when they do, grab them when they turn up because that's been a key thing that's shaped my career and just doing stuff for fun. A lot of the stuff I did just for fun. I wrote one of my games. I wrote just for fun. It was like a dartboard. And I thought that'll be fun. And I was like, what use is that going to be in a job? I'm not going to be writing games in a job. But then with a particular client, with the application I was writing for them, they needed an experience where the UI needs to be a little bit different. And part of that UI was based on that dartboard. So the dartboard's got the numbers around the outside. And basically I used that same algorithm, the same code to generate the UI element they needed. And I was like, I was like, I knew I need something like that and I already have it. And I just did it for fun and I was able to apply it to work. So many of the stuff that I did just as a hobby, like writing my own app, writing that Windows Phone app. I just wanted to write a Windows Phone app. But from that, I got a job as a Windows Phone developer, and then that changed to being a web developer, and that was a full-time job in the end. I got from that, from just writing an app on my own. Not didn't get any money from the app itself. It was just for the sheer fun of it, just to learn how to write an application and have an application out there, and I was able to get a job from there. So nowadays you could have like a GitHub repository. You might write some code because that probably has a lot more value than a CV. If you've got a really good GitHub repository with loads of examples and an employer sees that, they see that you've done a bit of Blazor, you've done a bit of .NET, you've done a bit of this, bit of that, that can add a lot. That mostly the things I've done in my spare time have added more value than some of the things I've done at work in future jobs. Sometimes, not every time, but you never know when something you've done for fun will come in handy at work. And that's the way to do it. I think just do stuff which leads to more opportunities and then take the opportunities when they come up.
So the day you started learning technology and working for technology after completion of your studies, comparing that day with today, so what is the difference and where you have came, how much distance you have traveled?
Yeah, so the opportunities have been a lot greater now than they were back then. Back when I graduated, it was very hard to find .NET jobs. I wasn't really doing .NET much at the time, and nor was anyone else. But within a couple of years, they were, but they were very rare in my part of the country. But now that's completely opposite. I know dozens of companies in the northeast of England who use .NET. If I've been able to get to the job that I'm in, but I know many other .NET developers. Used to not be any other .NET developers. I would speak to other developers and they'd use other technologies. But now that's not the case. We even have like a dedicated .NET user group in the Northeast called Hayton.net. We also have a long-term user group called AnyBytes that's been going for a long time, and I've presented there too. So .NET has a really strong heart in the northeast of England, but back when I graduated, that wasn't the case. There was a few big companies, but they required a lot more experience generally. But it's kind of nice to see how the sort of the northeast of England has changed, and the UK in general. There's a lot more .NET jobs out now. Obviously, as .NET has matured and also become open source, it's got a lot more popular. Some startups may use it. Bigger companies are obviously using it. So that tends to be the big difference I've seen. Uh, the actual like learning experience is the same if you're doing it on your own. So you kind of learning on your own is basically the same. It's just easier to access that information, like I said before. But that's the biggest difference I've seen. How far has it taken me is a good question as well, because it took me to Seattle. Weirdly, I went to the Microsoft Build conference back in 2012. It was something I had seen online. I'd watched the conference itself and always wanted to go. And as a student, I was wanting to. I'd obviously graduated, but I'd had my student loan, which was a lot less than it is now. And I'd saved up the money to pay it off. And I saw Microsoft Build come up, and I thought, well, I can either pay off my student loan or I can go to Build. So obviously, I chose the sensible choice. I went to Build. It took me a few more years to pay the loan off, but going to Build was absolutely incredible. I'd never been to the United States before. I still haven't been since. I've only been the once. And I traveled all the way to Seattle. I hadn't flown long haul. It was the longest flight I'd flown before then was like 3 or 4 hours. So it was 9 hours. So I'd never been on a 747. It was amazing. I just went over there, did the tourist thing, did the Space Needle, all that kind of stuff. I didn't really do much research. I just went for the Space Needle because that's what I knew was there. And people were telling me, oh, why didn't you go here? Why didn't you go there? Someone told me to go to the Boeing factory, which I did as well while I was there. But whilst there, I obviously attended the sessions in person. It was absolutely incredible. I mean, being at Build in person was a world away from watching it online. You got to actually speak to the Microsoft developers themselves, speak to the people that I'd only known online. And it was amazing to sort of have those one-to-one conversations and speak to people. It was also like very honest as well. You had developers giving their real honest opinions about the state of play back in 2012, and that was really unexpected. It was fascinating to hear that sort of experience. That was when Windows 8 came out. The Windows 8 had a difficult development process, and it was good to see that there was some acknowledgement of that, but also that there was a vision for the future, which obviously we're in now. But at the time, there was they weren't sure which direction to go in. But it was really good to sort of get that sort of base and see other devs as well. I was queuing up for the keynote and speaking to other people, and it was just really amazing to have that experience. And if it hadn't been for the opportunities I'd taken previously, I wouldn't have done that. And it was just really, really valuable going over there. I want to do it again. I've been doing the online builds the past few years. But hopefully I'll get a chance to go to Build again. I mean, if you can afford to go, do it. That's my, if anyone's out there thinking, should I go to Microsoft Build? Absolutely. Because it really accelerated my trajectory. It made me a lot more confident because I had to basically go out there on my own. So it was that really helped with when I came back to do presentations and stuff. I was doing them before, but I wasn't as sort of articulate, I guess, as I was later. It just really boosted my confidence. If I can cope with going all the way to America, spending a few days there on my own, going to places and come back, then I can do anything. So it really accelerated my personal development. And of course, as a developer, it was amazing. I mean, being at Microsoft, their headquarters, it was something I had to stop myself. I stood in their HQ and it was like, I think it was probably sunrise because it was quite early in the morning. And I just looked at it and thought, I'm at Microsoft's headquarters. I cannot believe this. It was like one of those moments where you just had to stand and take it in for a minute and was like, people who know me would be like, oh, you must have thought that was amazing. And yeah, I did. It was absolutely incredible. Just that one moment just made me realize I'm here. And, I could see the Xbox building. They weren't letting anywhere near it because there was a new Xbox in development. So we couldn't go anywhere near it because we might have seen it. But it's just amazing to be there. And they don't hold the build conference at the Microsoft headquarters anymore. That was the last time they did it, was when I was there. But it was absolutely incredible. If you're an MVP, you can still go there. I think they have their summits there. But it was amazing, absolutely amazing. I think it was back to being in person again this year. They had it in the Seattle Convention Center, and that looked amazing as well. So yeah, just that from the opportunities I've taken, it took me all the way to America and beyond, basically.
And what are your Microsoft achievements?
That's a good one. So, I think that application, that Zune application, was a real big achievement for me. I had expected Microsoft to totally do this, so I was like, they will do this. They will bring that what they called the Zune Social to Windows Phone. Because Windows Phone had Zune as well. Like you could play the music. It has all the sort of playback features, like what you'd see in Spotify today. But it didn't have the social bits, didn't have any of the social bits. I just assumed that would come along. I launched and thought, yeah, they'll add this because they were always updating the platform when it was out. It lasted a good few years, but every month that went by was another month that wasn't added, and they never did. They never added, and I was really proud of that. And I know Microsoft had some awareness I was doing that because they'll always let the app get through the store because it was like one of those things where it used some things of the Zune service that they didn't publicize, but they would make sure the app got through. So I'm sure there was somebody in Microsoft's, championing that application because it was great to be able to have something like that. It's a key Microsoft feature developed by a developer who isn't from Microsoft and just have that facility. And I remember somebody mentioned it a couple of years back. They said, they helped out with the video. They let me use their Zune card, as they called them. That was like a gamer tag. If you're familiar with a gamer tag on Xbox, it's the same sort of thing. And they mentioned it as well. And it was just great to sort of have that kind of impact. That there was people all over the world. I had people from like different countries, from India, from Poland, and all countries all over the world downloading my app. I got over 333,000 downloads over its lifespan. People were still downloading it when they turned the service off. When Zune failed and they turned the service on, I was going to delist my app at the same amount of time, and there was still dozen or so people downloading it that week. And I was like, sorry, it doesn't work anymore. But I was really proud of that. That was really, really amazing. That's definitely one of the highlights. But just generally being like supportive of .NET, I love the fact that as a .NET developer, that's perceived differently now. It used to be very proprietary, but now it's so open and it can be in the browser, it can be on Linux and all those sort of things. So being a .NET developer now is really great to be able to talk about. And there's so many talks about them, not just my own, but others as well. So I think it's great to see how far .NET's come in all that time. And that's my job basically, I think, is to share my passion for software development and encourage other people to do it too. I know my tutorials have been used by like a university. I saw a lot of referral traffic from a university, so they were clearly using my materials absolutely fine. I also saw someone on YouTube produce video versions of some of my older tutorials. That was amazing. I was like, that's what I want. I wanted people to learn from my materials and pass them on to others. I've had my workshops help colleagues at work learn C sharp. I wrote a C sharp workshop and I had a couple of colleagues learn that from myself. That was their first experience of C sharp was my workshop. And some of them have gone on to do more development things or various other things from that. It's just kind of amazing to think that something that I wrote is someone's first experience of programming potentially. There's dozens of people all over the world, I'm sure. Maybe someone watching this right now who I've helped. I don't even know them. I might never know them, but it's amazing to think that I've helped inspire them on their developer journey. And that's my main aim. That's the point of everything I do is to sort of share, learn as well, because I'm always learning and just inspire those developers like myself. If I'd had that when I was at uni, when I was a graduate, don't know where I'd be now, but I'm pretty proud of where I am now, to be honest. I am where I am because of the opportunities I've taken and the road that I've done. I wouldn't change it for the world. It's great to see that I am that inspiration potentially to someone out there. Even if it's just one person, if I inspire one person to take up .NET or check out something or use Blazor or just play around with some technology, then that's pretty cool.
And if this video reaches the Seattle and Microsoft, what words or what thoughts, what ideas, or what suggestions you want to give them?
That's a very good one. Yeah, it's kind of a good opportunity to say something. Yeah, just to say you should be proud of the work you do. Anyone at Microsoft, who's a developer who's working on the teams and they're building the products, whether it's Visual Studio or even something like Word or Excel, millions of people around the world are using our products. I'm always proud of the Microsoft products, the successful products like Xbox. I've got an Xbox, played my games on that. But I'm also proud of the failures as well. Microsoft tried really hard. Zune was a great idea. It was a really good music player for the time, but the era of the music player pretty much disappeared soon afterwards. Everybody struggled in that sector when the smartphone revolution happened. So Microsoft gave the smartphone revolution another go, and they just weren't able to succeed. I was probably more disappointed than anyone. I was a Windows Phone person through and through. So I'm just proud that Microsoft gave it a go. A lot of companies wouldn't even bother. Why even bring out a phone? You've got Apple doing it. You've got Google doing it with Android. Why even bother? But they did because it was worth a go. You never know when something might be a success. Xbox struggled. It's hard to believe that now. Xbox was almost one of those failures. Xbox was one of those things you would say, oh, remember that games console Microsoft had? And it's a massive part of their business now. You just never know what might be successful. And that's the kind of thing I'd like to say is I'm just proud of the work that Microsoft does. And, more people should use their stuff. There should be more people using .NET. There should be more people doing anything really regards to Microsoft products. Give it a go, even if it's not for you, give it a try. And then you'll find out, don't just assume. That's the main thing. But yeah, it's just good to have. I wouldn't have got into programming at all if it wasn't for Microsoft. My very first experience was of basic license from Microsoft. Microsoft products have been in my sort of entire experience, and yeah, it's just amazing to see the products that have come out there and to have gone myself to see where many of these products came from. There was stuff in development there that came out years later, and I was like, I was right next to it at one point and didn't even know it. So it's kind of cool to see how far reaching, something from Seattle has reached someone like me in Gateshead in the northeast of England is absolutely incredible. And then for me to be able to talk about it here because of that is amazing too.
And at last, what is your observation about my work? Have you seen any videos of mine on YouTube?
I have, yes. It's great. I've seen you interview many people from Microsoft, so it's really great. It's kind of cool to see someone like yourself sort of interviewing various tech people. I've recognized many of the people that you've spoken to. So yeah, it's wonderful to have a project like this where you can interview many people in the tech sector, many people I look up to as well. So it's kind of nice to be on the same level as them. I'm just a dev from Gateshead, right? But it's really, really good to see the kind of people you've been speaking to, and to be on the same channel as them is absolutely wonderful. And yeah, no, I'm really, really pleased with the work you do. It's, as a content creator myself, I can kind of see the amazing work you put into all your videos. It's absolutely incredible the people you've had and the stories they've had to tell as well have been fascinating as well. There's even people I knew of who I learned more about from your video. So yeah, really, really great job. It's an excellent channel. And yeah, you've talked to so many people I wish I could speak to as well. So yeah, really, really brilliant.
I did masters in software engineering, also bachelor's in computer science and engineering. Right now, I'm doing some DevOps engineering projects. So, how this experience talking with experts like you who are in the industry from long time, who solve different problems, who are handled, who was involved in different projects, belongs to different industries, and who are from different parts of the world. Me talking with experts like you, what I'm going to learn, how this experience I'm going to put in my career in coming days.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's brilliant. Glad I'm forming a part of your career as well.
How this experience is going to be helpful, this communication with different experts in the world.
Yeah, I think it's good to sort of be able to talk to more people, I think, isn't it? Because you get a much broader sort of sense of what's going on in the community in general. That's what all of the events I tend to go to are like. We have like bigger events, like we have a developer down in Reading, which is Microsoft's UK base. And that's an opportunity where you can see some amazing, speakers, the kind of speakers that I aim to be like. You've got, people like Dylan Beattie, who's just an amazing speaker. He's just so fantastic. You could talk about anything. It's just fascinating. And you've got various other speakers. You've got people like Jamie Taylor as well, who's a podcaster as well. He does some amazing work. Who also speaks to a lot of people in the Microsoft stack as well. So it's just nice to have that sort of opportunity to sort of speak to all of these people. And it's an enviable position you've got where you've been able to speak to these amazing people in my sector and learn about their experiences and allow that to add to your own as well.
Can you share your web links with my podcast listeners so that they can follow you and can learn from you?
Yes, of course. Yes. So my website is rogueplanetoid.com, and that's where I post my articles and my podcast as well. And I do a few posts there as well. I've got my learning website, which is tutorialer.com, and that's where you can get workshops and tutorials. I've got some mini talks as well. On my other website, I basically post like articles of events I've been to. So I also do talks at many of those events as well. So basically, if there's an event out there in the Northeast, I've probably been to it as well. So that's the kind of stuff I write about. But yeah, and you can find me on social media. I'm Rogue Planetoid pretty much everywhere. So I'm Rogue Planetoid on Twitter. You can find me there as well. And I'm also on Instagram. I haven't posted much there, but I've got my like promos for my podcast there. So if you want to get a little bit of a gist of what my podcast is like, you can find me on Instagram as well. But yeah, if you see Rogue Planetoid, that's probably me.
So I'll put your web links in the description of this video on YouTube, also on the screen, also on my website. People who finds my website can able to see the links and can able to see the work that you're doing and can learn from you and develop their skills.
Excellent. Yeah, it'd be good to see that.
Can I put this video on my YouTube channel, podcast, website, internet, social media as well as with your permission?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I could do that. No problem.
Thank you again, Bill, for giving me opportunity to interview you for my channels and telling something about you and some of your experiences. And let me ask you a few questions.
No, it was a pleasure. Really glad to be part of your channel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, again.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.